the 1850s, huge deposits of copper ore were found in the copper country of the Kievan Peninsula located in Michigan. Over the next decades, the land flourished with mines. However, when copper demand decreased and working conditions worsened, workers went on strike for a better life and safer equipment. The demand to increase profits of copper mines in Michigan found companies with an imbalance between their right to productivity and the responsibility to keep their miners safe. Workers had the responsibility to prove that they had a right to demand safe working conditions. During the Industrial Revolution, about 33 million immigrants came to America looking for a better life. Most immigrants were very poor and needed jobs to survive. When the Industrial Revolution started, and particularly during the Civil War, copper was in great need for the production of weapons like bronze cannons, as well as wires for electricity. When demand exceeded supply, copper mining in Michigan became a huge business, and in the center was the Kievan Peninsula, a stretch of land in the northern part of Michigan projecting into Lake Superior. During the Civil War, the price of copper increased from 19 cents per pound to 55 cents per pound. C&H, also known as Calumet-Hecla Consolidated Copper Company, was the largest and wealthiest copper mine in the Kievan Peninsula and was the prime mine for copper in the world. The annual copper production from the mines peaked in 1906 at 100 million pounds, but then went down to 67 million pounds. After a steady decrease in profits, C&H decided to use the one-man drill instead of the two-man drill. The one-man drill was a drill that needed only one man instead of two, which reduced costs for the company. It got its nickname Widowmaker from the many accidents it caused that killed workers. The Widowmaker was feared by the workers for two main reasons. First, the dangers which were connected to the new machine. Miners had to work on their own. In case of accidents, the next person to help would be 500 feet away, too far to even notice the accident. They also wouldn't be able to talk to each other during their work. The miners also objected to the one-man drill because they feared to lose their jobs. Previous drills were operated by two men, whereas the one-man drill would cut the numbers of required employees. The conditions of workers grew steadily worse. They had to work in temperatures from 115 degrees Fahrenheit to negative 27 degrees Fahrenheit. There were no bathrooms or breaks, no water or food, except what they brought themselves, and there were plenty of rats. Workers had to work 11 hours daily. In winters they didn't see natural daylight for months, and they got paid very little. Although C&H took over responsibility for their workers' welfare by offering them cheap housing, schooling for their miners' families, as well as doctors and food supplies at wholesale prices, the companies controlled the workers by trickling down these benefits. If miners complained about their working conditions, they could be fired. Any worker who disobeyed orders or didn't follow directions or wishes of the company and their superior would lose certain benefits or even their jobs. Although the idea of workplace safety was considered very differently in the early 20th century than it is now, even then the workers found their rights for safe working conditions violated by the introduction of the one-man drill and proposed working distance of 500 feet. In July 1913, all mining companies in the Kievan Peninsula received the same letter. This letter announced a strike would start if the companies didn't bargain with the workers' unions. Their union demanded a minimum wage of $3 per day, an 8-hour work day, and the end of the one-man drill. The mining companies refused to reply to the letter, which led to the start of the copper mine strike of 1913 to 1914. 19,000 miners voted to go on strike for better working conditions. On the first day of the strike, only 500 workers marched down the streets to C&H. The marchers quickly turned into an angry mob who threw whatever they could find at the C&H officials. On the second day of the strike, nearby mines closed and miners marched down the streets in huge numbers. On the third day, the miners' children and wives joined the parade and raised their hands in support. At the end of the day, Annie Clement, a huge supporter for better labor conditions, raised the American flags to let the workers know the fight was on. James McNaughton, the manager of the C&H company, called for National Guard troops to keep the peace. Several confrontations between the strikers and the National Guard troops followed and were described by Michigan's National Guard General Pearlie L. Abbey as following. Lawlessness broke loose throughout the district today Northwestern train, windows smashed with rocks. 30 men broke into workmen's home at Quincy. Royalist deputies at Quincy. Parades at Calumet. Armed with clubs. 3 fights, 2 deputies badly cut up. 13 strikers arrested. 4 arrests near Almy for shooting up workmen's premises. 2 arrests at Alous, picketing throughout entire district. The strike went on for months. The miners were struggling from lack of payment. They didn't know how to feed their families, and many left to look for jobs in other regions. Parades were held to support the strikers. Non-strikers were terrorized by union members. Strikers were mobbed by troops and private organizations. The killing of 2 innocent workers in a boarding house by members of a private detective agency that was employed by the mining companies raised additional tensions. December 24th, 1913, in Calumet, Michigan, miners had a Christmas party with their children. The party was located at the second story of the Italian Hall. During the party, someone screamed fire. Although there was no fire, the scream was enough to cause the 400 kids and adults to panic and trying to escape. They stampeded down the steep stairs. Kids and workers tripped and fell and suffocated on top of each other. 73 people, mostly children, died that night, and a 74th person the following day. Workers believed that someone ordered by the mine owner yelled the word fire and wanted to create a disturbance. Although that was never proven, this devastating event further intensified the conflict between the two sides. These tensions are described by Jeremiah Mason from the National Park Service.
People were so divided over the issue of the strike. And so there were people who had been strike supporters and ended up having to leave the area, and there were people who had been maybe less ardent strike supporters and could stay. They were willing to turn in their union cards. They were willing to go back to work for the company, but if they had really believed in the cause of the strike, of course, doing that did not leave them being very happy. And of course, there was so much violence during the strike. A lot of families were affected in that way, that people were lost, like at the Italian Hall disaster and at other events during the strike. And that had a long-lasting impact on a lot of people here.
After 9 months of hard and bitter striking, 2,500 strikers voted to end the strike. They only achieved one of their following goals. They shortened the workday to an 8-hour day and limited the use of child labor. However, the companies continued to use the one-man drill in all their mines. They rejected to pay $3 per day. In the end, the workers couldn't prove that the one-man drill was more dangerous than the 2- or 3-man drill. However, a law approved in May 1913 required a distance of less than 150 feet between 2 people working on drills, so that they would be able to help each other. Clearly, the miners were right about their fear that the one-man drill would cause job losses. The labor cost sheets at the Quincy mine shows that the number of workers were reduced by 25% between 1910 and 1950, the period when the drill was implemented. During the same period, almost the same amount of rock was drilled.
So a lot of people, after the strike in 1913, a lot of people left. A lot of people went to Detroit to work for Henry Ford, who was paying $5 a day, that sort of thing. And people who were here tried to move on as best they could.
Although the strike had limited success, it is considered as a major turning point in the history of the copper country. While many workers eventually lost their jobs, the strike would also lead to the declaration of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which established a minimum wage of 40 cents per hour and a maximum work week of 40 hours, which gave workers more rights. So although the strike's outcome was relatively small, it had a ripple effect across the country that was important to give workers better working conditions and rights. Today we are therefore still affected by the strike through these changes.
Take a trip with me in 1913 to Calumet, Michigan, in the copper country. I'll take you to a place called Italy.